Good morning. I'm just going to continue with my series featuring the first American Chess Congress. We're in the final between Paul Morphy and Louis Paulsen. Morphy won the first game. It is the first to 5 wins, draws don't count. The second game was a draw, and Paulsen won the third game. The fourth game was a draw. Now we're here in the fifth game. And Morphy plays e4 as ever. And Paulsen plays c5. He was a specialist in the Sicilian defence, and some of his theories are still currently used in standard Sicilian play. Of course, Morphy develops a piece, and this is called the French variation. If you play knight to e6 first, it's the Taimanov variation, but this is the French variation because it's similar to a French defence, and it can lead to a French defence situation as well. Pawn comes to d4, and it's taken. And the bishop comes to attack the knight. This is the Paulsen, named after this Paulsen and Basman defence, which we've seen before. So, Paulsen has developed a piece and attacked a piece at the same time. So Morphy returns the compliment by developing a piece and defending that piece at the same time. Queen comes to b6, and it's attacking this pawn on b2 and doubling up on e3 here. Knight comes to b5. Wait a minute. What about bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes? Yeah, but then when the bishop comes here, the queen will have great difficulty. Will not be able to defend. Sorry, when the bishop comes to e2, it won't be able to defend against both knight to c7 check, winning an exchange, and knight to f7, meaning that black can't castle, winning a piece actually, because if the king comes to here check, then the knight takes here check and wins the exchange, and if the king comes to here, the knight takes the bishop and wins a piece. So it doesn't work. So he develops a piece to have a bit more defense and be ready to castle, but Morphy takes, of course, and takes the opportunity to say check and prevent him from castling. Now he takes the bishop because the knight was attacked and he didn't have a really good retreat square for it. And now Paulsen takes, and he's got two attackers on the c2 pawn and one attacker on the e4 pawn. Sorry, I'm getting confused with which language I'm speaking there. But Morphy decides he's going to defend with the bishop. Why the bishop? Because if you come knight here, it defends the pawn and blocks the attack. This just defends them both. Why with the bishop? Because then white is ready to castle. So piece is developed, and a piece is developed, and the king is put in safety with castling. h4, yeah. Maybe I might like to see Paulsen trying to get his king to safety, but yeah, I can understand that move. It's fair enough. And now he's just threatening to come up one more square and bust open the king a little bit. So Morphy's forced to play h3, and now the pawn comes one more time. a3 to allow the possibility of playing b5, driving the queen away. The rook comes to g8, yeah, making good. If he gets to play this and then take here, the pawn is pinned. So, you might be able to win a pawn. The queen is driven away, as expected. And the knight comes to c5 and threatens the queen. Queen comes to c7. And, yeah. The pawn comes to f3 to support the e-pawn. Looks like it exposes the king a little bit, and it does, but it's not easy for white to exploit this. And yeah, in this position, I think white has a slightly better endgame. So, I invite you to have a little think about it. Think about what the engine will say. Think about how you would describe the situation. And say that to yourself, and then have a guess what the evaluation says. Put the video on pause if you want to. Drinking my tea. Yeah, I would say that white has a better pawn setup than black. That these advanced pawns on the G and H file are possibly a weakness. That white has got the only bishop, which is going to be difficult to contest, and if it comes bishop against knight in an endgame, that will probably be an advantage to the player with the bishop. And I would guess that the computer says it's an advantage of about 0.6 to white. Let's see. No, one pawn advantage to black. That's a really poor evaluation by me. But I'm a Morphy fan. I'm always thinking he's winning, even when clearly here he is not. So then we have to ask ourselves, what are the advantages for black that mean that he's almost a pawn up? Yeah, these pawns are very weak. This is a road to the king. The queen and the bishop and the knight aren't well coordinated at the minute. The knight comes to e5, threatening to take the bishop. So the knight's taken, and now we've got a pure knight against bishop endgame. I've said before, but I'll say it again because it's worth repeating. In theory, if the endgame comes to just queen and bishop against queen and knight with some pawns to both sides, the advantage will be to white. Why? Because the queen and the knight can cover all coloured squares. The bishops can only cover one colour of squares. And the queen and knight coordinate particularly well together. So, the queen comes to e2 to unite the rooks, and possibly to allow the possibility of playing f5 to attack the queen and to break open the black position. So the rook comes to g7, and the rook comes to d1 to get on a nice open file. Rook comes to d8 to contest that file, and the queen comes to f2, partly to attack this pawn, but partly so that the bishop is free to move and attack this pawn. Pawn comes to b6 to defend the pawn on a7, and the bishop, as I mentioned before, and the pawn, as I mentioned before, attacks the queen, and they swap off. Paulsen threatens mate and tries to say to Morphy, "No, you take my queen. I don't want to take yours." But Paulsen defends the pawn on b2 at g2, no more mate threat, and Paulsen takes the queen. Morphy recaptures, and now in this position, with its rooks, then bishop and rook is a better endgame than bishop and knight because they're able to coordinate better. I think we see a little bit of this better coordination in the finish to this game. So the pawn on g2 is threatened. So Morphy defends it. And there's only one move I'd be thinking about playing here, and that is rook to g3, so that I'm threatening to take this pawn. It's a one move threat, and king to h2 or king to f2 takes care of it. So yeah, maybe it's not so worth playing. But he doesn't do that. He supports the pawn, which is at the minute attacked by the rook. And the pawn chases the knight away. The knight attacks the rook. The rook attacks the knight. and the pawn takes, and the knight takes back. And now we're getting less pieces on the board. The rook, great position. The rook is coming to threaten to come to c7 and start clearing up. So the king comes to d8 to prevent that, and he threatens to break open the position on the queen side by moving his pawns. The knight comes to d5 to threaten this pawn, and also to give him the opportunity to maybe play knight here to attack this pawn when it comes forwards. The knight is attacked, and it retreats. The bishop retreats to c3, f3 even, where it's defended by the pawn and where it cannot be pinned by a rook coming to d4. Even though our rook couldn't come to d4 at the moment because of pawn, but maybe could have thought about playing rook here and then rook here, or rook here and then rook here. So, and now also it means when the bishop moves, this pawn is attacked by this rook, so this rook has to keep looking after that pawn. d5, I really dislike this move. Why? Because Morphy can attack this pawn from here with the rook, from here with the rook, from here with the bishop, and from here with the king. Right enough, Paulsen can defend with the knight here, so can defend, or rather here with the king, because there it defends the knight as well, so not here. So Paulsen can defend with the knight, with the king here, with the rook here, and with the rook here or here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And black can attack with 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the same. But then, in that situation, all black's pieces are paralysed. And it might be possible to make a break on the queen side here. But immediately, Morphy goes for attacking the pawn on e6. It's probably not great to come here with the king. The rook can then be defended by the pawn, and then pawn can come here, and this pawn would be pinned. So he thinks it's better to come with the king to d7, but then the pawn is attacked for a second time, and the rook comes to h3 to defend it, h6 to defend it. It might have been better to play the more flexible rook to h7, d7, or rook to e7 even, or rook to e8 to defend rather than h6. I think it's a bit inflexible there. And it's attacked another time, and the king comes to defend. And as I said, the king, white is now free to move his other pieces. And the pass pawn is of course pushed. And great. He comes to attack the knight and the pawn, and he leaves the pawn temporarily undefended. And he says check. Alright, he's going to be winning this pawn back. But Morphy defends and says, yeah, if you win that pawn, I'll swap off the knight. And that's what he does. And then it goes back to 3 pawns each. But Morphy gets the rook on the 7th and starts munching. That's why we chess players rave on about a rook on the 7th. It's so powerful. King comes c5. Yeah. Maybe the rook is coming here. Maybe the rook is getting onto this row and attacking these 2 pawns. King attacks the pawn. And now the pawn is defended by pushing. Morphy takes. Check. Pushes past. And pushes. Rook here, check. King to d3. Has he got a perpetual? No. But king to c4. Rook to c3 mate. So there's a danger there. And Paulsen, although this looks a very lost position, makes a good fight of it. So king goes to c2. And now the king goes to the A file. Same line as the rook. Something might be able to happen there. And the knight comes. The king comes to D5 to attack the pawns. Maybe he's coming to D6. Maybe he's beginning to C5, C4 even, and threatening mate. Check, and he comes to C4. And no, if he gets a check on the D file, on the A file, it's mate. Pawn runs away, so he threatens mate. Fantastic. Morphy sacrifices his rook. So there's the state of the king. The pawn goes to C7. You could try and stop it here, but it's not going to work because the pawn's just going to come at C6. And it's defended, and then he keeps to this line, but then he goes to B7, and even if he wins the pawn, he gets a new queen. So he comes to H8 to stop it, but the pawn comes to B6, and no, it's the king comes to C5, and no, again, he's threatening checkmate in the corner. But the advance of the pawn threatens, guarantees a new queen, and defends against H8. And Paulsen resigns, leaving Morphy 2-1 up in the match. Yeah, he made it look like a simple matter of technique once he'd gotten the rook on the 7th, and it was. But Paulsen kept him honest, put up as good a fight as it was possible to put up. And we all know we've all messed these up in time trouble. And if you've seen my Desperado game from the other day, you've seen that people get away with these kind of things. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on my videos. Thanks for today. Bye.